Welcome to the Empowered Christian Woman Podcast. My name is Jeannette Cochran. I'm a pastor, women's leadership coach, and self-proclaimed Jesus feminist. I'm on a mission to inspire and equip women everywhere to own our voice, speak up, create, and lead wherever God calls. Because when women rise, everyone wins. Hello, friends. I'm Jeannette Cochran, and I'm your host for the Empowered Christian Woman Podcast. I'm thrilled that you've taken the time to listen today. In this first episode, I want to tell you a little bit about me, why this podcast, and what you can expect to get when you listen. I'm a pastor, an entrepreneur, and a women's leadership coach. I pastor at a church located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. I serve there as the executive pastor, and I'm privileged to lead a beautifully diverse congregation and staff team. I have a master's degree in practical theology and a master's degree in organizational leadership, which brings together my two passions, Jesus and leadership. And I've been trained as a professional coach through the Life Forming Leadership Institute. And most recently, I've engaged in some specialized training related to developmental coaching and the cognitive science of change through the Coaches Rising Institute. And with all of that formal education, my graduate education taught me a lot about leadership. It taught me all the leadership theories, how to motivate people, how to lead change. But it did not address the complex challenges that I encountered as a female leading in organizations that have been largely shaped by men and traditional masculine models of leadership. And nowhere is this challenge more evident, sadly, than in Christian ministry, because so many of our churches today still use the Bible and God language to silence and marginalize women. And so I want to specifically speak to Christian women who maybe have been raised in traditions where they have been taught to stay within a box, within a certain role, and there were limits on what they could do or say, or maybe they were socialized using the Bible in a certain direction. But I also want to say that women who are non-Christian or who just experience some of these things in other contexts can also benefit from this podcast. I know that we as women, we face similar challenges with gender bias in the secular business world as well. And while we've made loads of progress, and I don't want to diminish or even pretend like we haven't made significant progress. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful to be a woman alive in the 21st century with all of the benefits that I have and all of the work that our foremothers have done for us today, but we still have work to do. The messages in the prevailing culture give us ideas, sometimes overtly and sometimes subtly, about what it means to be feminine and what's the right way to be feminine and how to do it and how not to do it. And so I think all women leaders can benefit from this podcast. But just know I'm specifically addressing Christian women because that's been my story. And because I know that so many of us have been disempowered and held back by misguided teachings about patriarchy and gender roles that are just rampant in Christian communities. For myself, I was raised in a very conservative Christian tradition where women did not teach and they did not lead except for with other women and children. In my younger years, I never wanted to be a pastor. It was not something I aspired to. It was not on my radar. In fact, in my way of thinking, that was just so far from who I was because I was female and I had never seen women lead and teach in the church. So it was not something that I set out to desire. But I won't go into my whole story here. You'll probably hear parts of it in later episodes. But as God really started opening my eyes to who I was and the calling that He had on my life, it became evident that I was being called to pastoral ministry. And so I had to do a lot of work of digging into scripture to understand many of the passages that I thought prohibited women from teaching and leading men in the Christian community. So I want to say this was 20 some years ago. But back then, so often I really felt alone. And it was confusing because I had never seen women lead and teach. And I wasn't confused about my calling. I just didn't know what it looked like to be female and to be pastor. But I knew that God had created me both. And so in this podcast, I want to just speak to some of the challenges that I faced and how I've learned and how I've grown through loads of research, trial and error, and getting a better sense of who I am. And I want to share that with other women. I think you'll find that this podcast is not your typical women's ministry training. I'm going to sometimes talk about things that will push the limits of what we've been told is acceptable in Christian communities. I want to expose and uproot the remnants of patriarchy so that women and men, quite frankly, can break free from the small boxes and the cultural stereotypes and the biases that are holding us back, that keep us quiet and playing small, so that we can step in together to the fullness of all God has for us in our lives and in the world. We've made significant progress in women's equality and inclusion, but we aren't there yet. We haven't arrived. We still face unique barriers, both externally from organizational systems and structures, values and biases that privilege men and masculine models of leadership, masculine styles of leadership. But ladies, we also face internal barriers that hold us back. We sometimes hold ourselves back from confidently stepping into our power and owning our identity as leaders. Sometimes we're not even aware of it. I have to say that's part of the reason I want to do this podcast and speak into this area, because as I've grown and I've learned, what I've come to realize is I've become more aware of organizational challenges, but also personal barriers that have held me back that I didn't even know existed. There's a fascinating article on the Harvard Business Review website entitled Second Generation Gender Bias. And the authors describe what women often face today. They have entitled it second generation bias because they say it's not that there's an intention to exclude women as much today, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not facing gender bias. And what they found was many women didn't even realize the gender bias that they were encountering. And so what they say is a second generation bias does not require an intent to exclude, nor does it necessarily produce direct, immediate harm to any individual. Rather, it creates a context akin to something in the water in which women fail to thrive or reach their full potential. And so in some spaces, the work that we need to do is this second generation gender bias, where it's not there's an intention to exclude us or to bring harm to women, but it's just the way that things have always been done. We don't even realize it's the water that we're swimming in. And in these contexts, women can't rise to their full potential. Over the years, I've begun to see some of these things and to grow and change myself and to start to speak out within the contexts that I live and lead, to ask for what I need, to recognize what I need so that I can flourish. And I want to help women everywhere do the same thing, because we need more women leaders. We need all women to rise to our full potential, because when women rise, everyone wins. Our children are better off. Our families are better. Our faith communities are better because they're listening to our ideas, and they are better understanding what the problems and challenges are because women have a seat at the table. Our businesses flourish. The whole world wins when women rise. So let me talk a little bit about what the Empowered Christian Woman podcast is not. To help you understand what this is, let me talk about what it is not. It is not about man bashing. I'm not a bra-burning feminist set on overpowering men. I don't hate men. I'm married to a man. I gave birth to a male human being. I value and I love and I need men in my life. And I value men being true to their authentic self. So I'm not teaching women to hate men or to disparage men. I'm not saying that women, we need to fight for power, but rather what I want to advocate for is a whole new paradigm, which is a paradigm of mutuality, not powering over, but collaboration and true mutuality. A leadership that isn't built on power and hierarchy, but a leadership that is based on mutual submission, honor, and respect between men and women. This is not a new radical feminist agenda. Well, actually, it might be radical, but it's not actually new at all. It's actually Jesus's radical agenda. Mutuality is the model instituted by Jesus and practiced by the early church. It's a paradigm of leadership that I think our world is desperate for. It's a paradigm where everyone's voice matters, regardless of race, gender, or social status. And in a globalized world where we are hyper connected, in order for us to move forward as a culture, as a world, as a society, we're going to have to learn how to come together, how to value our diversity, how to listen to one another, how to make space for learning from one another and allowing different ideas to surface. And I believe that Jesus's model of leadership, of servant leadership, of mutuality is the paradigm that's going to help our world move forward. It's what our world needs. Secondly, the Empowered Christian Woman podcast, I want to say, is also about honoring all the seasons of a woman's life. So I am not here to say, hey, ladies, you all need to be all going for the corner office. You all need to be reaching for more and getting out in the world and pursuing a career. Not at all. The Empowered Christian Woman podcast is about honoring that we as women have lots of different seasons of our lives and they all matter. I want to celebrate and bring acceptance and encouragement for all women, regardless of what season they're in, because every season is beautiful. Every season matters. Every season is meant to grow us and develop us. I've been a professional working woman without children There was a season in my life where I chose to be at home full time when my children were young. And then I went back to work and I experienced what it's like to be a working mom, juggling all the demands and expectations of raising children and all the needs at home. And now I'm in a season where my children are young adults. And so I'm experiencing this brand new season of what it's like to have your adult children in the world finding their way. And as a new grandmother of two beautiful granddaughters. So I've experienced so many of the seasons of a woman's life and had the opportunity to make my own choices. The choices that were best for me and my family. And that's what the empowered Christian woman really is about. It's not saying that there's one way or one right way, but it's honoring that we should have the choices that are best for our families, that we should have a voice and a say into the life that we're called to and into the life that we want to create. Because every season matters. Every season is beautiful and is meant to teach us something. So we will honor all of the seasons and all of the choices of a woman's life. Some episodes will be just me, like this one, sharing things I've learned, practices and tools to help women speak up, create, and lead wherever they feel that God is calling them. But I also want to amplify the voices of other women and celebrate women's leadership. So other episodes will include guests to highlight the unique work that women are doing in the world, to bring together women so we can learn from one another and find role models and encouragement for the journey. In these next few episodes, I'm going to start by laying a foundation that addresses some of the biblical passages that have been used to hold women back from stepping into the fullness of all God has created us to be. Because what we've been told about ourselves, what we've believed about ourselves impacts how we show up in the world. And so I want to start by dispelling some of the ways that the Bible has been used to perpetuate lies, half-truths, and total nonsense about women. My intention is to release an episode every week, God willing, and I hope that you will join me in this journey of empowering women everywhere. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to listen. Thank you. Please subscribe and share this podcast with others, because together we can grow and develop and step into the fullness of all that God has created us to be so that we can rise to our full potential. Because when women rise, everyone wins. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Empowered Christian Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share it with other women in your network. For more information about me and the work that I do, check out JeannetteCochran.com. And I'd love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social. You can find me on Facebook at J. Cochran Coach or Instagram at Jeannette.Cochran.